Amen. Well, I'm going to try to keep this to a reasonable time today just because I have some packing to do and a flight to catch. And the airlines have sort of indicated that they're not going to hold the flight just for me. I'm just making that assumption. So today we're going to call this Where There's Smoke. And I think you know a little bit about where that's going. I will, next weekend, I don't know if I'll be doing an update. I'll be in Scotland at the Moriel Conference at Gartmore House, north of Glasgow. If you're in the UK, I don't know if the registration is still open, if they still have spaces or not. It starts on Friday, goes through Sunday, and we're having a church service on Sunday. So I just don't know about an update next weekend. I will be traveling. Should be back here in 2 weeks. That's when FBC, Mike Clapham will be speaking first hour, and we'll be doing a celebration of our 10th anniversary as a church that weekend. I can't believe it's been that long. We were all, I'm looking at, you all were a lot younger back in those days. And crazy. I did an update Friday night, intended to do about 20 minutes, of course, ended up being 40. But a lot of things going on. And there's some things I talked about Friday night that I said I might get to today, and I'm not going to get to them just because I want to focus on a few other things that are going on that I think are pretty important in the world. Certainly fall into the wars and rumors of wars category. And we talk about acceleration, convergent logistics, and understanding each week. And the further we go along down this timeline towards what I think really is the time of the Lord's return, I'm more convinced that this is a good grid to use just because it kind of encapsulates a lot of what's going on. Because whenever you talk about things, you talk to people. I did an interview with, I'm going to get her name wrong. I think it was Allison Steinberg. I apologize, Allison, if I'm getting your name wrong. Allison Steinberg at In Focus on One American News this week. You can find that on One American News YouTube or Rumble channel. It's only about 5 minutes long. But in talking to her, talking to other people, every time we get together and talk, it's like there's so many things going on that seem to be prophetically relevant. I even ran into a guy at the golf course yesterday who was talking about that too. He just said it just seems like there's something going on. He was a believer. So this is the sort of the core verse that we talk about, though, that in Daniel chapter 12, Daniel was given a lot of information, downloaded a lot of information about the future of Gentile world history and the end of time. And he did have a specific question, though, about what shall be the end of these things? And he said, "Go thy way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end. Many shall be purified and made white and tried, but the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand." And in Daniel chapter 11, it says that the wise who understand will instruct many. So we really want to be in that wise category where we're looking at these things that are going on and happening. And then this is a little graph chart that I did about the first four seals. I do think that the first four seals do relate to the birth pangs section of Matthew chapter 24, where Jesus was talking about that. And then you could actually go into Zechariah and read about the four horsemen there and get some additional information. But we're going to see, a lot of people think about or talk about like, what are we going to see before we're out of here, before the Lord returns? And I can say is, I don't know. But I do know you're going to see at least everything that's happened so far. But we're talking about the 10th anniversary of FBC. And when you think back 10 years, because I was doing these prophecy updates 10 years ago, but they were usually fairly short. They were. You may not remember. See, you're aging, you're forgetting things. They weren't as long as they are now, and they weren't as long as they could be now. And I see people doing them, and they're like 3 hours long. So don't get on my case. And I watch Trump. He goes down there and speaks, and he's up there for an hour and a half, 2 hours. So, of course, he was the leader of the free world for a while. But the one thing that we hear a lot is, I didn't think we would see these things. Well, okay, we've seen them. We thought we would be out of here before we saw any of this. And so the response is, maybe you're going to see a lot more, and maybe a lot that you don't want to see, but you need to understand, being part of the wise that understand and instruct many. So my view of these four horsemen, though, is that the seals open, and we can argue about when the seals open, and then they increase, sometimes quickly, exponentially, and they all kind of reach their peak, the effect of them, around the time of the return of the Lord. That's how I view that. And you can do that with the other seal and trumpet judgments, or the trumpet and bowl judgments as well. They may pour out in a much shorter time frame, though. But we see these things like, remember, I mentioned this last week, at Davos in 2020, now King Charles goes there, and he gives this speech, and look at how they have the crown on him. They've changed the crown into these colors. Now, these colors represent, I think, the Sustainable Development Goals of the United States. And as I mentioned last week, he has all of these programs, Terra Carta, that he's involved with. Davos is involved with this. They're doing all of these things. They have these meetings. They had Davos in January. They have Cannes in this month. They have the UN General Assembly in September. And then they have COP28 in the United Arab Emirates. And the big thing is to push out and roll this, the last, what they call on their websites, the last 7-year push to get their Sustainable Development Goals in place by 2030. And they're doing it on multiple levels. The head of the Guterres last week talking about the fact that we have these shocks, global shocks that are coming. So that's a lot of what we're going to see over the days and weeks and months ahead. So let's look at some of the things going on. Now, at least here in the United States, and I think worldwide, big news is that Trump was indicted again. He's indicted by a state prosecutor in New York City a couple months ago. He'll be arraigned in court in Miami by a judge that he appointed, I believe, this on Tuesday. Everybody's going crazy. The newscasters, and you can see that it's clear that the country is divided. So you turn on the progressives, leftists, communists at MSNBC, and they're giddy, and they say things like, we've crossed the Rubicon, that we had to indict a former president like this. We didn't have to indict a former president. In fact, what about the current president, who has 1,800 boxes of stuff strewn in his garage, other places around the country, University of Pennsylvania? How about one of your last presidential candidates, who had 33,000 documents that she destroyed off of her, 33,000 emails that she destroyed? But it's clear that the justice system has been weaponized. You can go to War Room. You can listen to an interview this week that Alan Dershowitz gave. And Dershowitz said, this is the end of America, because this is what's done in third world countries, and now they're doing it. The thing that I sort of look at, so Trump is indicted 37 counts under the Espionage Act. And again, what you're going to see is this narrative that he was going to sell these things to the Russians or to somebody else. When you have a president where there are documents coming out showing that his family has gotten millions of dollars of payments from foreign countries and foreign governments, foreign companies. And the whole thing was a hoax, this Russian collusion thing. The Durham report came out, and you never hear anybody in the mainstream media discuss it except that, well, Durham was just a Trump lackey and he had to do that to preserve his reputation. So 37 counts. This is what happens, and I've had a couple big white-collar cases, and this is what the prosecutors will do, is they will overcharge the case. I heard Trump speak. I'm going to play a clip of him a little bit later. And he said, look, this could have been one charge. But why are they doing this? Because they're trying to intimidate him into, they're trying to beat him into submission. I don't know that if Trump went and offered to plead guilty to a misdemeanor charge, they would accept the guilty plea. Because they want to put in, they talk about it, he's going to end up spending the rest of his life in prison. How old is he? 74, 75? 76. So it's very troubling what I'm seeing happen, especially the hypocrisy of it. Merrick Garland is probably the most politicized, if not outright corrupt, Attorney General that the United States has ever had. And that's saying something, given some of the cads that we've had in that office. It's bad. So watch what's going to happen on this. I'll talk more about that as things come out. Listen, I've read through parts of the indictment, and I will be honest with you that some of it, if it's true, it's bothersome. I'm just going to admit to you that and again, that's probably because I'm thinking like a lawyer and analyzing that. And what would I be doing if I was advising the president? He's had a number of his counsel that have resigned. I've also seen counsel have come out and said that the prosecutors were very improper in the way they approached the right that you have under the Constitution. Everybody has under the Constitution not to be forced to be a witness against yourself. In a court of law, in a trial, you're prohibited from really commenting on that. But when they get in front of the grand jury, and I've been in the grand jury room, so I know what goes on, it's the prosecutor, the assistants for the prosecutor, people handling the documents, paralegals, and it's the 23 people on the grand jury. There's no judge. So you can't sit there as a witness in a grand jury room. You don't get your attorney. You have to testify. And the prosecutor has pretty free rein. But some of the things, if what the lawyer that represented Trump is telling correctly, the prosecutors were acting in an incredibly unethical manner in front of the grand jury. And to be honest with you, that doesn't surprise me one bit, given the way that some of them are. And listen, there are good people in the Department of Justice. There are good people in the FBI. There are good people in the U.S. attorney's offices. But there is a level of politicization and corruption now and weaponization of that system that we've never seen. And it's very troubling. Part of that comes about because of this guy. Anybody know who this guy is? This is the son of a guy named George Soros. And what has happened is that, I've mentioned this a number of times, there were a lot of financial settlements that took place back after the 2008 crisis, the banking and housing and lending crisis, the mortgage crisis. What happened after that time was there were settlements by big banks and institutions in the billions of dollars, and the billions of dollars were funneled and laundered through NGOs, through LLCs to left-wing organizations. And this guy's father has contributed billions of dollars to these organizations. And I don't think that the Republicans have they've not set up a system that's parallel. And they're really behind the eight ball on a lot of these things. That's just my opinion. So watch the space. And by the way, Caroline Glick has a great article this week about you can be against George Soros and not be anti-Semitic. Because what happens on the left, if you criticize George Soros, oh, you're a Jew-hating, you're anti-Semitic. No, I'm a little more nuanced than that. I really dislike what George Soros does. His ethnicity makes no difference to me at all. He's just a bad guy. And he's funding all these left-wing prosecutors. And you're seeing the impact of that in some places. As I mentioned in the midweek update, late midweek update that I did Friday night, in San Francisco right now, the San Francisco Chronicle had a big front page article the other day about 13 major real estate properties in downtown San Francisco that are at extreme financial risk right now. The owner of two of the largest hotels in San Francisco, the big Hilton that has about 2,000 rooms, I think it's the largest hotel in San Francisco, and the Park 55, which has almost 1,100 rooms. The owner of those hotels has said, we're not going to make any more payments. We're going to let the loans go into default, and we're going to let the lenders foreclose on the properties because San Francisco is a mess. They've destroyed the city. I was there 4 years ago for a seminar for a few days, and it was pretty shocking then. And that was before everything really melted down. You're going to see a lot of disruption in the commercial real estate market at some point. I don't know when it's coming. When the lockdown started a few years ago, I was in a small group of people who handled commercial workouts, foreclosures, receiverships. And everybody back then, 3 years ago, were gearing up for a lot of work because of the way the demand for commercial office space had been destroyed in a very short period of time. And it's not really come back. There are people trying to make it come back, but the workers are resisting. That's impacting the value of buildings, but that's not been priced into the real estate and banking sectors yet. They've been kicking the can down the road for 3 years. And that group, we met for a couple, 3 months off and on, and then we just sort of didn't meet because nothing was happening. And here we are 3 years later, and nothing's happened in that sector. But now you're starting to see it in places like San Francisco, in part because left-wing prosecutors funded by this guy's father's foundation, and they'll say, well, you don't have any proof of that. I can go back, I can pull you segments from CNN, from MSNBC, from the New York Times, from the Washington Post, where they talk about Soros funding all of these prosecutors. And now if you make that accusation, you get your videos dinged, you get your views suppressed, you may even get your video taken down, because they say, well, that's not true. It is true. You guys reported on it. I'm only quoting you in what you do. And then they say you have no proof. The next thing I want to talk about is this. This is kind of a big deal. The EU and the WHO have launched this is the title. This is a press release from the WHO, launched landmark digital health initiative to strengthen global health security. Here's a tweet about it. Launch a landmark digital health initiative to help protect people across the world from ongoing and future health threats. This is the first building block of the WHO Global Digital Health Certification Network that will develop a wide range of digital projects. So what they're doing is they're partnering with the EU, which has developed the infrastructure that's needed for such a certificate. They talked about this at the meeting that they had in Indonesia in the spring, sometime in the last few months. And remember the one guy was saying, the next time it comes, we'll do better about a digital health passport, so people will be able to move around if they comply with certain restrictions and requirements. And it's coming. This is from the Defender. They call it the death sentence for millions. WHO launched new global passport initiative. I won't say the word that's there. It's coming. You can go and look up this article and understand that Bobby Kennedy, while he's done, RFK Jr., has done some good work. He is very left-wing in many things. So, you got to kind of pick and choose among people sometimes. We like the good things, but we don't like the other things that they do. This is from the New York Times this morning. Does it seem like they're shoving things in your face right now? Everywhere you go. It's shocking. I mean, I saw, and I don't know if it's photoshopped or not, a picture of the rainbow on the rocking chairs on the front porch of a Cracker Barrel. Yeah, so I didn't check the one. That's probably the closest restaurant to my house is a Cracker Barrel. Tell you what kind of neighborhood I live in, huh? But I don't know if the one here locally in Delaware has done that, but there were pictures of one that had like the slats on the back of the rocking chairs were rainbow colors. And there's a lot of companies doing that. But but the thing to catch is the imagery. And this is what I talked about on One America News show the other day, was this pushing of this agenda. But look at the imagery. This is the White House of the United States of America. And so there's a couple things that I see in that flag, is that this movement is very diverse racially, but they're bringing their kids to this stuff. And I watched a number of videos. I would show you the videos, but to me, they're like pornographic, at least borderline pornographic, of what goes on at some of these parades. And I saw another picture this morning, and the guy says, look at this. And it was clearly inappropriate, and a lady was standing there holding their child, like a 4-year-old. So what was the reason? He says, okay, you Democrats and supporters, defend this. Defend it. And the people, oh, that's photoshopped. That's made up. But you can go watch the videos that aren't made up. But it does show that we're at the stage now where nobody's going to believe anything. They're going to make up videos of people in this coming campaign that are going to be somebody saying something that's very inappropriate, and it's going to look like that. They played that clip of the guy from NVIDIA last week. Part of the video, the NVIDIA video, was that he did at the end. I don't know if I played this part. There it is. This is the head of NVIDIA.
In 5 years, just utterly incredible. There's no question that we're in a new computing era. You don't have to just AI, this generation, this computing era, does not need new applications. It can succeed with old applications, and it's going to have new applications. The rate of progress, because it's so easy to use, is the reason why it's growing so fast. 1964, the year after I was born, was a very good year for technology. IBM, of course, launched the System 360, and AT&T demonstrated to the world their first picture phone. Encoded, compressed, streamed over copper telephone wires and twisted pair, and on the other end, decoded. Picture phone, little tiny screen, black and white. To this day, this very experience is largely the same. Of course, at much, much higher volumes. For all of the reasons we all know well, video calls is now one of the most important things we do. Everybody does it. About 65% of the internet's traffic is now video. And yet, the way it's done is fundamentally still the same.
Well, what he did in that video was that he said something and immediately had it translated with his voice speaking into about 5 or 6 different languages. Understandable, and you could not tell that it was fake. And we're at a very strange thing. But look at the imagery here. Look at the flags. Here's what I thought when I saw it. 3 crosses on a hill. And what's in the middle? In replacing the Lord. Now, you can say, John, you've really gone crazy. Get on a plane, leave the country, and but there was this big presidential proclamation about gay rights, that they're going to push this. And they're fighting over the mutilation of children. I don't know how else to describe it. And so what happens is the whole narrative gets controlled. This is a report from the Times of London. Surgery damaged my body forever. It's not safe. So Sweden, I believe Norway, the Netherlands are banning these surgeries for children. And what happens here is it's pushed at the White House in the presidential proclamation. We're at an inflection point. Legislators are banning this thing. 600 hateful laws targeting the community. Books about LGBTQI people are being banned from libraries. Yeah, they are. In fact, I don't know, in this picture, yeah, there it is. See the little girl holding up the book? Madeline Goes to the White House, I think is what. It's a book about a transgender child going to the White House. And they're acting like this is just perfectly normal. What happened? So one of the arguments made is, well, if we don't do this, they'll commit suicide. That's the argument. There was a major study that was relied on. I'll try to post it if I get to the computer today. I'll try to post the link to the debunking of the paper. This paper's relied on by everybody that says that when children are denied these hormones, these puberty blockers, hormones that make permanent changes, they're not reversible. Your body doesn't change. If you interrupt this process, you're done for life. It's a life sentence. And some people, and so they say, well, if we don't give it to them, we're just being compassionate because they'll commit suicide. And there's a major study that they cite. Paul McHugh, who was a psychiatrist at the transgender clinic at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, which is where the first transgender surgery was done in the 50s or 60s. And they did surgeries for years. Paul McHugh was their leading psychiatrist in that program. And they stopped doing the surgeries. Because what they found, and Paul McHugh reported this years ago in the Wall Street Journal in an article, that when they did the surgeries, the people were 19 times more likely to commit suicide. And these people have the audacity to talk like they're compassionate? This is crazy. Look at this. Since 2021, at least 20 Republican-led states have passed this bills. This is from the New York Times, regulating the lives and medical care of young transgender people. What do you think you're doing when you give them these things? When you do surgery, you cut off body parts. It's absolute insanity. Conservative activists and parents have led efforts to ban books about LGBTQ people and have protested outside of events where drag queens read to children. Yeah, because we consider it grooming. I'm sorry. You're Look at the pictures in these pride parades. What these kids are witnessing, they're desensitizing the kids. It's a process. Oh, so maddening. Joe Biden, this year's Pride is caught between the push and pull of progress. The First Lady said during her own set of remarks referencing the state of conservative bills and laws. Outside the gates of this House are those who want to drag our country backwards. Well, let me flip that around, Jill. Inside the gates of that House are people who want to drag the country into drag. Two can play that game. Okay, but look at these numbers. These are charts in the New York Times this morning. Look at the change between adults 18 to 34 from 2009 to today. And it's probably over 20%, actually. If you cut back the 34 upper end, cut it back to like 29, it's probably over 20%. Gay marriage, you see what happened there. But then it says, fewer have reported harassment in high school. It's like cut in half. And what do they tell us? Oh, we're harassed all the time. So this study that supported the position that they're more likely to commit suicide if you don't do this to them. Give them these treatments. Paul McHugh and some others have an article that's out now saying that article, the research is so bad that the authors of the research are withdrawing it. But do you think that's going to stop them? What happens, though, too, is when people do research that's contrary to that, it doesn't get published. It gets suppressed. They get fired. It's crazy. And so you see some of these things that are just crazy. And so it builds this narrative. If you're against it, you can see here on the left, this is from about the Trump indictment. Trump case poses test of justice system, public trust and democracy. And then over here, Trump backers unleash wave of violent threats, worrying some analysts. Worrying the left-wing analysts that want to push the narrative, that have to keep this alive. We're in a very, very bad thing. So here's an article, this is related to the WHO. By Iris Biometrics coming to 3 national ID programs. I talked to you about this, the AI pioneers who fear extinction, including one of the founders of OpenAI, Sam Altman. And he's pushing this company called the WorldCoin Crypto Project. This is the thing, you stare into it, it scans your iris, and you have a permanent digital ID. And so now you have countries, this is from Biometric Update, Iris Biometrics coming to 3 national ID programs. Those are Pakistan, Jordan, and I want to say Nigeria. And you don't think of those as like, oh, these are the most forward progressive countries everywhere. This is also from the Bank of International Settlements. This is the thing called Project Aurora. And what Project Aurora is, the Bank of International Settlements, which, by the way, their headquarters looks very much like in Basel, Switzerland. Go look it up on Wikipedia, BIS, Bank of International Settlements. It looks like the tower. It looks like an artist representation of the Tower of Babel. And so what Bank of International Settlements does is they're one of these central bankers, and they're trying to use AI to analyze all transactions that take place in the world on a financial basis. This thing is not, and so you see this is their own video that they put out about how this works, and you see how they're saying, okay, everything is interconnected. And we're going to analyze this and get the data points and be able to identify this through all these computers that we're running. You see the digital analysis. Yuval Harari did a talk recently talking about the development of AI. I'll probably talk about that in one of my talks in Scotland, which will eventually be up on the internet. But because this thing is just so insidious. But understand that what they're doing with AI in terms of financial transactions, they're also doing with AI with regard to data points that might be used in defense installations and attacks and satellites and that type of thing in different wars. It's really all connected. So they're coming with the CBDC. You can go to the Atlantic Council, and they have a thing called the CBDC, Central Bank Digital Currency Tracker, and you can see all the countries that are involved in this, and they're all trying to roll it out. Now, the question is how quickly, and that's anybody's guess. And you'll see them push things like Ukraine's going to be the first country to go completely digital. If it survives, the war there is very troubling. This is a major dam in Ukraine. And this is what happened. That's an older video. I thought that was a recent video. Well, anyway, this big dam on the Dnipro River was attacked this week, and this is a drone footage of what happened. And there was a lot of concern. What's going to happen if this dam is ever attacked and the flooding that will take place? And so now there's a big argument on social media and everywhere among defense analysts and non-defense analysts. Everybody has an opinion. Ukraine did it to themselves. Russia did it. And look, when you analyze it, there's reasons why you could say Ukraine did it. But there's a lot of reasons to say Ukraine didn't do it. And there's reason to say that Russia did do it. And there's reason to say, well, Russia would never do that. Because it's going to have a huge impact. This is a picture of the dam before and after. And there was an explosion. There was a massive internal explosion. So the question is, who did it? At this point, you wonder, what difference does it make? Look at some of the before and after pictures. This is a grain silo facility. Of course, Ukraine is one of the major agricultural countries of the world. The Atlantic Council did a survey or a paper last year. And the Atlantic Council is, I would call it, a center-left organization, globalist in its orientation. But they did a paper and they said how Ukraine could feed the world. Ukraine has incredibly thick, rich layer of topsoil, and the Atlantic Council made the case that Ukraine, if properly managed, could feed the world. Well, now, so here are all these grain silos in other places that aren't going to be able to be used for a while. They're damaged. They're flooded. If there's anything in them, the crop is probably ruined. Here's a town. This might be Kherson. This is what it looked like last week from a satellite. This is what it looks like today. Here's another village along the Dnipro River. It looked like that. Now today it looks like this. And the people are it's just absolutely, there's yet another one. And you can see the fields there. And the reports are that as people are waiting on their rooftops to be rescued by the Ukrainian forces, they're being shelled by artillery. I don't think we really understand exactly what has gone on in Ukraine from both sides. I mean, it's war, but probably more people killed in the military side of Ukraine, certainly than in the American wars all the American wars combined since World War II. Easily that number. But it's hard to get exact numbers, but it's been, as some people describe it, this is a report from Reuters that was in the Jerusalem Post this morning. Freight train derails near Russia's border with Ukraine in Russia, and this is happening. Russia relies heavily on rail transportation to get supplies to its troops. They've lost a lot of trucks over the course of the war, Russia has, and so it's hard for them to supply their troops. So here we see this sort of back and forth. This is Ukraine to the left of the reddish area, and then the Crimea Peninsula is the one down here. Now, the Crimea Peninsula is very dry, arid peninsula. Russia took it over in 2014. They had a election that was monitored by international monitors, and the people there voted they wanted to be part of Russia. And a lot of people won't accept that, and there's talk about Ukraine trying to take it back. But there's like one sluice gate that comes from the Dnipro River, which is sort of along the top dark red line. And that's what supplies water to the Crimean Peninsula. So they have food and water to drink and water to irrigate their crops with. What's happening is that now with the destruction of that dam, that sluice gate might not work. So that's an argument that, well, Russia wouldn't do this because it's going to destroy Crimea, as if that really is a major doctrine of Russian warfare historically. It's, we're going to destroy our own people. That's not usually, doesn't usually enter into the equation. That's just my view of it. You're free to disagree with me. As I always say, you're always free to be wrong and still be my friend. But it's a problem. And so now this area may become very, very dry and not produce food, which it's been producing for a number of years after Russia took control of it, but had access to the water that came from Ukraine. Now that water's cut off. Now a lot of those areas are flooded in southern Ukraine that are heavy agricultural producing areas. They're not going to produce things. They won't get to markets. A lot of the world is dry right now. We noticed this when we were out west. People were saying, even if we got rain this year, it's not going to affect the crops this year because it's too dry. That was what we heard in parts of eastern Washington and other places. So if you think the food thing is going to turn around this year that we were always talking about last year, it's probably going to be worse this year and next year. It's going to be high inflation. People don't have feed for their cattle, so they're killing them off or selling them off. And they're not reproducing them. So the price of beef is going to probably skyrocket. And I know what you're going to say. I thought it already skyrocketed. It just got a little shot. It's going to skyrocket. Now, exactly when that's going to happen, I'm not a prophet, but it seems like there's a lot of indication that it is. Our government, through the Agriculture Department, had a big conference about backing off in the agricultural sector because it produces too much, uses too much carbon, produces nitrogen, pollutants. It's affecting the environment. So we're going to, John Kerry said, we're going to cut back on agriculture. They bought out thousands of farmers in the Netherlands. They're talking about doing this in Canada. They're talking about doing this in the United States. Ireland is proposing that they're going to cull from their cattle herds 200,000 cattle in Ireland. What are people going to eat? You're going to eat grass. And you won't own anything anyway, but you're going to be happy because we told you to be. So this is a very volatile area of the world. Just looking at some maps here, you see here, this is the Eastern Mediterranean, and then Turkey, then the Black Sea and Russia. Here's another view of it. yet another view. And I drew a line from Jerusalem straight north to the North Pole. And it's interesting, because we always talk about Ezekiel 38 and 39. It says, from the north, the remote parts of the north. Now, that phrase might relate to a place in southern Turkey. There's some indication that might be. But it goes almost right by Moscow, but it goes through Turkey. So I think at a minimum, these countries come from that region. Erdogan, who was reelected, his family comes from the area of Georgia, and really the northern region of what was the Assyrian Empire back in the old days. That's Erdogan. This is from Al-Quds newspaper in the West Bank, Palestine, publication this week. And I think it's a very interesting imagery of what's going on. Do you see the imagery? That's the world that's being squeezed by this conflict between Russia and Ukraine. And I think it's pretty accurate. Now, I'm going to play some comments from President Trump. And I'm not sure if I'm going to comment on them or not. This is what he said at the rally yesterday. This is probably about 5 minutes. So here we go.
I fully rebuilt the U.S. military. We had more ammunition than at any time. And as I said before, now we have almost none. I imposed a powerful travel ban to keep radical Islamic terrorists and radical jihadists the hell out of our country. Took a lot of heat. They said, no, let them come in. Oh, really? Why do you want them to come in? Why do you want them to come in? Let them come in. Why? Tell me, please tell me why. And if you just take a look at those 4 years, how did we do on that front? We did great. We accomplished all of this and more in just that short period of time.
I'm going to fast forward this to a place where he talks a little bit about Russia.
What we can accomplish in the place, and they say 2 people were injured. No. Hundreds and even thousands of people were killed in those attacks individually. And hundreds of thousands of people are being killed. I'll get it done very quickly before I ever get to office. You need the power of the Oval Office to be able to do it. You need that. But I'll get it done very quickly if it's still going on, which is hard to believe it could continue. It's a horrible, horrible, disgusting war. I'm the only candidate who can make this promise. I will prevent World War III. I will prevent it. And now people believe it, too. And without me, it will happen. And this won't be a conventional war with army tanks going back and forth, shooting each other. This will be nuclear war. This will be obliteration, perhaps obliteration of the entire world. I will prevent it. Nobody else can say that. I know all the players. I deal with them, and I dealt with them very successfully, and they respected your president, and they respected your country. And now they don't have any respect for your president or your country. To stop the Marxist prosecutors who release rapists and murderers while persecuting conservatives, I will direct a completely overhauled, and this is so important, a completely overhauled DOJ to investigate every radical DA in America for their illegal, racist, and reverse enforcement of the law.
Okay, you can find that on any number of outlets, C-SPAN, NBC, local outlets, everything. So let me talk a little bit about this very quickly. The fires in Canada. It's very dry. You may have noticed it's very dry around here in Ohio. We haven't had rain for really noticeable rain for some time. It's supposed to rain today. At least that's what my body seems to be saying when I got up this morning. So let's hope that it rains after I get out of town. But look at, these are areas that have burned, and then the red areas are active hotspots. Here is a video that someone did. This is Quebec, and this is a time-lapse photography, and I want you to see, like, people are not denying this. Okay, there are fact checkers fact checking it, but it looks like those fires in Quebec all sort of started at the same time. Now, it could have been lightning. It could have been intentional. And there's a lot of theories out there right now about it, from UFOs to directed energy weapons to Extinction Rebellion types who are setting the fires. So the media is now getting in and saying, well, there's no proof that it was done by the leftists, the environmental radicals. Okay, but that doesn't answer the question is, how did this happen? This is Quebec, Nova Scotia, fires all over the place. Here you talk, this is sort of a freeze frame of Quebec. And all these fires came, and the smoke has been incredible. This is how the smoke progressed. This is this week. This is Monday, Tuesday. The dark areas are the heavier smoke. Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So Thursday was the heaviest day, and you can see New York City was just getting slammed with this. Here's a picture. This is Washington, D.C. from June 5th through, I think, June 8th. And you can see the days that the smoke was really heavy. You can freeze that and blow it up. Here's New York City. And New York City said, hey, the orange man gets indicted and we have an orange sky. So they're trying to draw some kind of parallel to that. And the Canadian wildfires, how they're caused, I don't know. Interesting imagery. There's the Brooklyn, I think the Brooklyn Bridge. No, that's maybe the Queensboro Bridge in New York. And then Times Square had this thing about Diablo with the orange sky, kind of an interesting imagery. Another bridge in New York. And while they're doing all this, this comes out that almost all countries will miss their net zero goals. Oh, really? I saw a video of a lady in, it was in England, and the guy was sitting there in a Tesla reading on his phone, and she came up and she's yelling and screaming at him. What are you doing? You're running your engine. You're polluting, you're spewing carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. He goes, lady, it's an electric car. Don't change the subject on me. And she just, people are losing their minds. They really are. So this is, I wanted to say this is what happened in Reading, Pennsylvania this week at a pride parade. I'll speak over a little bit. Guy held up a sign saying about Jesus said to go and sin no more. Okay, so he's confronted by the police. I've been on the street. It's a public street in Reading, Pennsylvania, next to Lancaster County, conservative area.
People that are in hell. So you do you, and I'm going to do me. This is public property. Dude. God is not. That's all. Got this from your brother.
Getting this on film.
Can I give him my bag all stuffed in? Yo, I'm going to need you to go to 128.
You can hear the people at the parade
And they're clapping.
clapping. This is the United States of America.
I'm watching this.
Officer.
Was the United States of America. He was holding a sign quoting scripture. Now, the judge has thrown out the charges. And you know what? I hope they fire all three of those cops.
Yeah, they're threatening us earlier.
Especially the one that did it, but the other two for not stepping up and saying, you can't do that. What happened to these people? Seriously. Okay, let's talk about Middle East. Iran released this thing on the hypersonic missile. This is a picture of the missile. They had a big launch party. This is a video that they put out about the missile and its capabilities. Now, you need to always judge Iranian claims about their military stuff by a grain of salt. They say this thing goes 13 to 16 times the speed of sound. And listen, if Iran developed it while they're under sanctions, it's pretty impressive. Now, I think they're smart enough to do it. I don't know if they're capable technologically of doing it on their own, but they're working with Russia, right, on all kinds of things. And the launch party had big pictures of the Dome of the Rock, like a blow up of the Dome of the Rock. I don't know where I guess you buy that at Islamic Balloons R Us or something like that. But, it's kind of impressive. Here's the hypersonic option. Here's some other articles about it. Oh, this is what I mentioned earlier. Major livestock producing countries commit to mitigate methane in agriculture. People are going to starve, but they're not really, with AI and everything, they're not going to really be worth much anyway. So I guess it's okay. John Kerry said this: mitigating methane is the fastest way to reduce warming in the short term. Food and agriculture can contribute to a low methane future by improving farmer productivity and resilience. What does that even mean? That's a word salad. I guess you can eat that for dinner. We welcome agricultural ministers participating in the implementation of the Global Methane Pledge. Okay, so back to the rocket. I talked about this last fall. This is from an Iranian newspaper. And what it said was it was 400 seconds. That's what that front page of that newspaper said. 400 seconds to get that missile from Tehran to Jerusalem. 7 minutes. Netanyahu's been having Security Council meetings. I found this on the Ayatollah Khamenei's website this morning about how we're going to get the solution of the issue of Palestine. But look at the imagery there, the sinking ships. But what are they on? They're on the Sea of the Palestinian Khalifa scarf. Very interesting. This article from INSS, Deepening Economic and Security Ties Between Russia and Iran, talking about all the different areas. You can go to inss.co.il and download that. It will tell you all these things about the areas where Russia and Iran are cooperating. Blinken was meeting with the Saudis this week, but this is from JNS this morning. Foggy Bottom, that's the State Department, courts Palestinians as Ramallah insults Washington. Big front page thing of the Sunday Opinion in the New York Times. I know people get upset. Do you read the New York Times? Yeah, I do, because I want to know what it's sort of like, if you really want to know what the devil's thinking, you go where the devil's writing, right? And so Tom Friedman wrote this big editorial this week in this morning's Sunday Opinion, from Tel Aviv to Riyadh. And what he says in this is, it's very interesting. And he says, Saudi Arabia and Israel reinventing themselves. And so who is Tom Friedman, who I believe is Jewish? Who does he think is the good guy in this whole thing? Well, it's Saudi Arabia. Because women are free, They can drive cars now. You got the pictures there of a woman driving a car. But who's the bad people? Well, it's the Israel. They're going backwards. And it's interesting, this is David Weinberg, who works with the IDSF. This is in Israel Hayom, just published this morning, just a short time ago. Sabotaging Saudi-Israeli peace. The left prefers shafting Netanyahu and promoting Palestinian statehood over breakthrough diplomacy that would transform the Mideast. Now, it's very interesting the way this is all going. So David Weinberg, conservative guy, works with the IDSF, Amir Vivi, and those people. And he says, we need to really do something to promote the Abraham Accords. We need to normalize things between Israel and Saudi Arabia. And in doing so, we may promote peace with the Palestinians. That's very interesting. At the same time that's going on, There's an architect and activist who wants to build Jerusalem's third temple, and he's making proposals in that regard. And then a member of Knesset from the Likud party came out this week and said, divide the Temple Mount between Muslims and Jews. And guess what? He says, we get the Dome of the Rock part to the north, and the Muslims can have the southern half where their Al-Aqsa Mosque is. Now, that's not being well received in Tehran and other places, as you can imagine. Nevertheless, it's being proposed. And then there's this talk, we're going to build a house of prayer for all nations on the Temple Mount. I've showed you pictures from the TempleMount.org website, an architect who proposed dividing the 8-sided Dome of the Rock into 8 wings for the major religions, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, and Hinduism, and then their mystical counterparts would be the wings in between. I'm just saying that I don't know how far they're going to get with this. I'm just saying these are the proposals. You layer on top of that AI, and you see that verse in Revelation that talks, he gives life to the image of the beast. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means that this image speaks, and people hear sounds, and now we have AI people running around. I mean, I get stuff all the time. Generate AI videos, generate AI this, help your YouTube channel by AI. We'll take your videos and we'll cut them into short ones. So that means I have like 1 million videos if we do that. Because they cut the long ones down into the short ones. You get it's a joke. But, and I'm like, good luck with that. But it's interesting. So I'm just going to play a few minutes of a clip and then we'll be done. This is about 7 minutes. This is Caroline Glick interviewing David Wormser on her show this week. They talk about the Palestinian-Israeli issue, Saudi, Middle East. Now I want you to listen to the end. I think it's about 7 minutes. And David makes some very interesting comments about what happens if Iran gets a nuclear weapon. I would ask the question, what happens if Iran gets really has a hypersonic missile? And they can produce them in sufficient quantities to use them. My view is that that's as effective as a nuclear weapon in many respects for what they want to do with it. But they're going to work with North Korea. They're working with Russia. There's a big article in the Tehran Times this week, just yesterday, about the new charade. Oh, the U.S. is accusing Iran of supplying drones to Russia. Well, they're Iranian drones. They're picking them up off the street. They can prove it. And by the way, they talk about, Tom Friedman and all the great things that Saudi Arabia is doing. This is Al Akbar newspaper talking about Saudi Arabia in, I think, Friday's newspaper. And look at what they said. Look, you see the king there holding a sword. On the front page is a hangman's noose. And the article there says, on the left, Saudi Arabia to its citizens, always and forever, blood, blood. Accelerated executions without deterrence. The kingdom's swordsman escapes. A crime above the crime. The dead bodies are forbidden to their relatives. It's very interesting. So here's David and Caroline talking about just issues in the Middle East. I think David Wormser first.
Emerged. And what we see here is the death of the voice of freedom of America, because we're not abandoning only the UAE or even our allies like Israel. We're abandoning the Iranian people. They have made it very clear where they stand on this regime in a nuclear deal, which is they see no good coming from any deal with this regime. They see no moderation capable with this regime. And they look at it as a murderous, homicidal government, not their government, a foreign, in their view, a foreign homicidal government. So any deal with them is first and foremost an abandonment of the cause of freedom. So this is not only a strategic collapse, but a complete moral collapse of the United States.
I think I want to get into what the implications of this collapse are for Israel, but I think that we should spend a little bit of time talking about what the implications of the collapse are for the United States, because, they're losing their primacy in the Middle East to China very openly. Initially they thought, the Chinese mediated thing with a peace deal or whatever between Saudi Arabia and Iran was just to keep things cool, or the Saudis were keeping their options open, hoping that the United States would, regain its senses and mediate a peace with Israel, by giving the Saudis the security guarantees that they had requested openly, publicly, basically, through intermediaries. But now it looks like, especially with this naval deal, the United States has all of these naval bases, in Bahrain, and they have the air base in Qatar, and yet China is just bypassing them with this, isn't it? How do you look at this?
Absolutely. China is anchoring itself in the region in a more permanent basis with these relationships. Moreover, if you look at the Middle East in terms of traditional politics of the region, nations like tribes, sects, and so forth are always looking for the protector that can deliver them the security for their tribe, their people, that's necessary. And what we're seeing here is an open admission by almost everybody in the region that the United States is no longer a reliable partner in any shape or form. It's actually potentially fatal. So they're turning to who they see as the power and who can protect them. And the Chinese are playing this role very effectively because they have their relations, good relations with Iran and the revolutionary homicidal regime there. They have great relations. They don't care about the morality of it. And the Saudis look at them, the UAE looks at them and says, listen, if we make peace with the Chinese, if we give the Chinese what they need, which is strategic presence, then the Chinese will see a utility in restraining Iran against them. So you see the deal out there. It's essentially China gets everything in exchange for which they deliver Iran's quiescence vis-a-vis Saudi Arabia and the UAE, at least for a short period of time. The United States is no longer relevant. This is, if we look at the 50s with Britain and the collapse of British position in the region, this is far worse. Because when Britain collapsed, it did so under the umbrella of the United States, its ally. So it was really one Western ally was replaced by another. It also took really a long period of time. This is catastrophic, immediate, and there's nobody else but China to fill the void. And eventually I would expect the Russians to be back in some shape.
Well, the Russians are already back because they were the ones who mediated the normalization agreement between Saudi Arabia and Syria. So they're China's partner in this.
But I don't think the United States is fully appreciating the consequences of this. It's not only that major traffic, international trade passes through the Middle East, through Suez, Red Sea, or oil, and so forth. Simply, there is a climate in the world that will emerge of American collapse, American retreat, and with it a perception of the decline of America.
It's a two-part question. One is, there's a claim this is all a neoconservative plot, to continue their freedom agenda that got us all bollocksed up in Iraq and in Afghanistan, and we've paid trillions of dollars. We've thrown it all down the toilet, for these ill-conceived democracy ideas. And here you are going off again, saying that you need democracy in Iran. That's on the one hand. And on the other hand, what's the other side, right? So Americans can say, we've had it. We don't care. Let the Israelis deal with this. We're done. We can cut a deal with whoever we need to cut a deal with. We want to get out of here, period. And how do you respond to them? What are the national security implications? Forget America's allies. They're willing to betray everybody, I guess. But forget the whole question of American allies. How does this impact America's national security?
Well, Iran won't stop. Iran has already said, in 2006, just before the Lebanon war, Larijani, then their great moderate, we saw in the Iranian regime, went to London. And his message was quite clear. Convert to Islam now, because your terms will be much better than if you wait until after we can conquer you. The nuclear program in Iran, this idea that Iran is a regional problem, listen to their rhetoric. They have the same global threat that communism had. This idea that eventually they will triumph globally. So when they build bombs that have the capability of being put on missiles that can reach London, London should pay attention. They're going to be under nuclear threat. It isn't Israel only that will be threatened, saying if you act against Hezbollah, we nuke you. It's going to be London. It's going to be Paris. If you act, we will nuke you. If you abandon Israel, if you don't abandon Israel, if you pursue your interests, if you help Saudi Arabia, whatever, we will nuke you. You are going to see nuclear blackmail against Europe and against the United States eventually. And
So very interesting. So I'll make a reference. I will try in the video description when I have time to add a few articles I think you should read from Tablet Magazine by Tony Badrin. He's been on Carolyn's show a number of times. A good thinker. Here's an article. This is from May 3rd, 2023. Tablet Magazine, Tony Badrin, B-A-D-R-A-N. The New Herodians. Do you understand the biblical imagery that's being pulled into the articles here? That is very significant. And this is the subtitle for the headline. Herod the Great's alignment with the Roman Empire led to both the high point of Jewish power and the destruction of the Jewish state. It's a warning as to what he sees as coming. He has another one from May 22nd. The new Saudi state sets off into uncharted geopolitical waters. But listen to how Tony describes it. Far from being uncooperative, Saudi Arabia under MBS is playing precisely the regional role that Obama and Biden have long demanded, only more so. Interesting. And then finally, this last article, Team Biden mainstreams terror financing in Lebanon. Do you know that the second largest U.S. embassy in the world is being built in Beirut right now? And money is being funneled to the Lebanese army, which is really ending up under the control of Hezbollah, despite the State Department denials. Very interesting developments that are there. Pay attention, read your Bible, and sort of see how things that are going on in the world fit, because they fit very well. It's very chaotic. There's a lot of wars, rumors of wars, and that type of thing. And again, I'm not sure if there'll be an update next week. If I have time, I'll try to do something, but I'll be on the road and I don't know what kind of internet I'll have and that type of thing. So anyway, pay attention. We live at a very significant time. Let's pray. Lord, thank you so much for the day. Lord, we pray that you'll give us opportunities to share the gospel with people around us, especially in light of the things going on in the world that are happening that indicate that your return is near, and that we ought to be living like people infused with truth, standing firm in our faith and sharing the gospel with others. Bless us this week. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you.